Hello,
This is Ryan,
and I'm Zach.
and together, what are we?
Functionally literate. Sorry, it took me a while to read that.
Ooh, there we go.
Got it.
Oh, we can read.
Nice.
Yeah, we're
Now,
not on
yes.
air. You tell the audience what we're doing. I'm going to put us on air.
All right. We are going to be covering the next thrilling episode in the legend of Arthur. Morte Arthur, King Arthur, and Emperor Lucius, the Emperor of Rome.
Yes, so in my copy of the book, this is book 5. It's 12 chapters. Today we're going to cover the first half, the first 6 chapters. Yeah, it is King Arthur versus Emperor Lucius.
Bum, bum, bum.
Chapter 1. How 12 age ambassadors of Rome came to King Arthur to demand truage for Britain.
So in my copy of the book, this starts on New Year's Day.
I don't know if it specifies it's New Year's in mine. It is on a feast celebrating Arthur's triumphs over his enemies in Britain and France.
Yeah.
So it would make sense that would be on New Year's, but I don't think it's specified.
Yeah, so in my version, it says, well, it doesn't at the start say that it happened on New Year's Day. What it says is when the ambassadors go back to Rome and tell Lucius about how this trip went, that they spoke with him on New Year's Day.
Ah, I see. Okay.
So on New Year's Day, they're feasting, naturally, and they're celebrating like all of their past successes, and they've actually had quite a bit of time to rest and recover from all of the warring they've been doing.
Which has been a lot of warring.
Yeah, let's see. There was a war with 11 kings, and then there was a war with 5 kings, and I think there
then
was
he had to help Sir Bon and Sir Bors in France.
Yeah.
With, what was it, Claudius?
Sir Claudius. King Claudius.
King Claudius.
King Claudius.
Because they helped him against the 5 kings. He's like, I'll help you against this. It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Just a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And so now they finally had opportunity to rest. And he, of course, it's the New Year's Day feast. So he invited all of his knights and kings and princes of the round table to, sit at the round table and feast. And as they were feasting, 12 incredibly old men entered the court, which is significant because, in these archaic times, people don't get old. That doesn't happen.
Yeah, people get old. You just don't generally travel when you're old. Like, the old guy stays at home.
Sure.
Your grandpa might still be alive, but he's like Grandpa Joe and Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. Like, he lays in bed all day.
Yeah.
He doesn't go anywhere, because if he goes somewhere, he'll die.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, people that get old tend to die.
Yeah.
And so, like, it is significant that 12 old men made the trip.
Right, from Rome.
Yeah.
You're like, whoa, you guys got serious coin.
And it's all the way on the other side of Europe.
Yeah.
It's all the way in Italy.
Might as well be the other side of the world.
Yeah. I mean, for them, it was.
That's right.
So each of these men, they were literally holding an olive branch, which is a Greek tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey.
It's very Roman of them.
We come in peace. They said they were ambassadors from Emperor Lucius, who was at that time the dictator of the, quote, public weal of Rome. Public weal, the W-E-A-L, which I looked it up. It means the greater good. Mm-hmm. So they were representing the greater good of Rome.
Yeah.
So the ambassadors, tell Arthur, hey, we have a message. They paid him, the respect due his station, it didn't specify what that would be, but I imagine, there was lots of bowing and lots of we know who you are, and using all of his titles and maybe giving him a gift or two. So after they did all that, they said, the high and mighty Emperor Lucius sends to the King of Britain greetings and commands you to acknowledge him as your lord and to send him tribute from the realm to the empire, which, it is recorded, your father and his forebears have paid. You have rebelled paying tribute under claim of not knowing him as thy sovereign. That happened in Book 1. contrary to the statutes and decrees made by the noble and worthy Julius Caesar, conqueror of this realm and first emperor of Rome. If you refuse his demand and commandment, be certain that Emperor Lucius shall go to war against you and your realms and your lands, and shall chastise you and your subjects. This shall serve as a permanent example for all kings and princes as to what shall happen to those who deny tribute to the noble empire, that which dominates the universal world.
They think they're hot shit.
They really do.
Yeah.
I mean, in fairness, they haven't been proven wrong yet.
It is Rome.
It is Rome.
Yeah.
Like,
and aside from historical fact of Rome, Rome is very often symbolically used in place of the world writ large.
yeah.
You know, if it's Rome, it's the world. That's what you mean. So when Rome is coming to Arthur and saying, we demand of you these things, the entire world is telling Arthur, you owe us. And Arthur's going to say, get fucked.
Yeah. So so King Arthur, he doesn't say get fucked yet. He's like,
No. He's much more diplomatic and tactful.
He says, he commands the ambassadors to withdraw so he can confer with his council before giving them an answer. Some of the younger,
they convene the round table.
They convene the round table.
And of course, your hot-blooded young men are like, kill them!
Yeah.
Kill them all!
Yeah,
they dare insult us.
Mm-hmm. And Arthur, he commanded none of them slander or harm the ambassadors on pain of death.
That's right. He said, don't do that.
Don't fucking do that.
This is a matter of statecraft. War comes later. Statecraft is first.
And to really show how serious he is about this, he commanded one of his knights to take the ambassadors to their lodging and do all that is necessary for visiting ambassadors under normal circumstances, to do it with a smile on his face and to spare no small thing, because, quote, the Romans are great lords, and although their message displeases me and my court, I must remember my honor, end quote.
That's right. These are important men from an important place. You will treat them as such, even if we don't like them.
That's right. Which I think is very important even in modern times.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
And, I mean, it's in here to show you how much... It's to show the maturity of Arthur.
Yeah.
Is that he's considering these things, not just from like, well, I'm going to, be a slave to my passions, and when I'm angry, I'm going to kill the guy that makes me angry. He's like, well, hang on. I'm an important guy. I stand for something. I represent that thing.
Mm-hmm.
It would reflect poorly on all of England, of which I am the king, if I were to do that. So it is important for me personally that we don't, but it's also important for the Romans that they see we're not just some savage backwoods province of the old empire.
Mm-hmm.
We're a sophisticated people. We're not just barbarians.
So after the night that Arthur sent off to help the ambassadors feel cozy, the king actually counseled with the round table. He told them the situation because not everyone was present when the ambassadors showed up. So he told all of them the situation and asked for their advice. And so Sir Cador, C-A-D-O-R.
I'd say Cador or Cador.
Has this guy come up yet? I don't think he has.
I think he's been name dropped, but there's not been, the adventure of Sir Cador.
Okay. So Sir Cador spoke up first. He said, "Sir, I think I like the timing of this message. We have had much time to rest and lounge about. Let's make war with the Romans."
It's a very knightly response.
It
He'd be
is.
like, you know what? I've been itching for a fight, and Rome seems like
They want to
want
fight.
one.
Yeah. So Arthur's like, well, while I believe these tidings please you, the Romans' demands do not please me. I will not pay tribute to Rome, which is why I seek counsel. It is my understanding that King Belenus and King Brennus of Britain once ruled the Roman Empire, as well as Constantine, son of Helene. This is blatant evidence that we owe no tribute to Rome. We are descendants of Romans and therefore have the right to claim the title of the empire. That's the end of the first chapter.
Yeah, so it's really interesting here. So the reason it's significant, I think, that Rome represents the world is because Arthur is a god-appointed king.
Supposedly, yeah.
Yeah. So in a sense, he is above the world. And so the world is coming to him saying, hey, we're checking you back into reality. You're not that big a deal, actually. England is not the center of the world.
You're not hot shit.
Right.
We are.
Nor is
give
it
us,
even...
Give us money.
Yeah, you're not even that big of a place.
You're just a fucking
in
puny
the
little
grand
island.
scheme of things. Like,
Yeah.
you're a small little thing. Which, I mean, real history shows...
That doesn't matter.
Britain took over half the damn world.
Yeah.
But the world is challenging the divinity of Arthur,
Mm-hmm.
his right to sovereignty, by demanding this tribute. And what's interesting is that they both have legitimate claims. The Romans aren't wrong in asking for the tribute because King Uther did pay it. King Uther's predecessor paid it. His predecessor paid
Set a
it.
precedent.
Yeah, they're like,
Listen.
England's been doing this. We're not like randomly knocking on your door and saying, like, hey, give us money for the first time ever. Like, this is a normal thing
Yeah.
that we've expected. We're just coming to check up on it and be like, hey, you owe us that money. Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
You're paying that money. And Arthur's like, no, I'm not going to pay your
I'm not
money.
going to pay your fucking money.
Now, Arthur has, we're going to assume legitimate, historical evidence that they are actually citizens of Rome, not vassals of Rome.
Right.
And so the difference would be that citizens don't pay tribute, citizens pay taxes.
Yeah.
Vassals pay tribute.
The thing that I'm wondering about is, if this is true, how did Rome go from acknowledging them as a city-state to a vassal state?
Historically, this story, if we're going to assume that it's historical at all, would have happened after the splitting of the East and West Roman empires and the fall of the Western Roman Empire.
Mm.
So Rome has ceased to be this like civic and cultural center of the world. Now, Rome still thinks they are and continues to try to exert that. I mean, there were no end of Western Roman emperors, but it was civil war after civil war after civil war constantly.
So then this story, in a lot of ways, then, is like the final death knell of the Roman Empire.
I would say this is happening probably immediately after.
Yeah.
You know, like Emperor Lucius is emperor of an idea.
Yeah.
The idea doesn't exist anymore, but he's still like, but it's kind of like the Holy Roman Emperor.
Yeah.
Before the Holy Roman Empire existed.
Uh-huh.
They're like, you're the emperor of Rome. And it's like, what does that mean right now?
Mhm.
And then they went out and conquered and, you know, made it a thing again, but it didn't exist when the title was bestowed.
Mm-hmm.
And so Lucius is like, I'm the emperor of Rome. I'm the emperor of the world. I am important. And Arthur's like, never heard of you, bro. So I get why it would be logical that Rome is like, no, they're a vassal state, because Rome doesn't have a solid handle on its own damn history.
Yeah.
So they would probably not know.
They're really, now that you say that, it seems like Rome is really just operating on inertia,
Mm-hmm.
because they,
Yeah.
even though, their handle on things is tumultuous, they still have all of these lands that have been owing fealty to them.
Yeah.
And are still owing fealty to them.
And tradition is a very strong force. It takes a
Yeah.
lot to buck that in good ways and in bad. Like for Rome, they're not going to just easily give up the idea that they run everything.
Right.
And the people that are so used to being under the authority of Rome
Are going to continue to.
right, without good reason, they're just going to be like, I mean, it's working, whatever, we'll just keep, that's what my grandpa did.
Here's your money, here's your food, here's your wheat. Have
Right.
it.
And
Yeah.
especially if that's the extent of your involvement, the history of the Western Empire it started as that, and it sort of devolved into more like what we see in the Morte Arthur, which is like kinship, family bonds
Mhm.
emerging as the main political tie.
Yeah.
But that's why it's interesting that Arthur's like, actually, we have my ancestors have at one point been the emperor of Rome, assumably in that time of constant civil war.
I feel like he read up on his own family history sometime between now and when he was first asked to give Lucius his beard, He was just like, he was at the time, because at that time he was
Yeah.
like, no.
Yeah,
And,
I'm
and
not
he
gonna do
didn't
that.
really have any reason. He was just like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. Well, I could admit for a lot of people, genealogy can be fulfilling and enlightening, and it's interesting to look into. You know, to know the history of your family, know
Absolutely.
how you got to where you are, what your ties are to the specific place that you're in, if there is one, why you're not where you used to be.
Especially if you're someone like Arthur, who
Grew-
discovered he
yeah.
was adopted upon drawing the sword from the
Right.
stone.
Yeah, is like, oh, my family's actually super important, and I didn't know it until now.
Yeah.
That would be very fascinating. But Rome stopped being, what do I want to call it, a hereditary dictatorship
They became a republic.
when, well, they were a republic, then they became a dictatorship again because
Mm.
Julius Caesar became the emperor.
Mm.
But with Julius Caesar, the hereditary part stopped.
Yeah.
It was ostensibly might is right. Whoever had the largest private army in Rome became the emperor. And his family would rule only so long as they maintained the strongest private army.
Yeah.
And so the fact that some British ancestor of Arthur's would have been the emperor is not hard to believe because, I mean, if they just had more men to fight, then they win. And that was a legitimate way to take the throne. And so Arthur's like, we've set a precedent, we can follow through.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Chapter 2. How the kings and lords promised to King Arthur aid and help against the Romans.
So, after King Arthur says to his men, basically pulling an Uno reverse, and is like, actually, the empire is mine, King Anguish of Scotland, who I believe is new, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the last king of Scotland was slain by Sir Kay.
I believe so.
Yeah. So this new king of Scotland says, Sir, you have the right to be stationed above all other kings, for no one else is equal to you in Christendom. Just a reminder, literally all the Christian kingdoms.
Mhm.
Nor knighthood or dignity. I counsel you never to obey the Romans, for when they ruled these lands, they put great stress on our elderly and extorted heavy taxes on our realm. For this reason, I vow vengeance on them. I shall give you command over 20,000 of my soldiers at no cost to you. My men and I shall go with you whenever you're ready. Then the king of Little Britain made a similar promise, giving King Arthur 30,000 men. Arthur thanked them both. And then the Lord of West Wales also promised 30,000 men. Sir Uwaine and his son Sir Eider, who I do not remember coming up before, and their cousins promised to bring 30,000 men as well. Then Sir Lancelot with all other promised in likewise every man a great multitude. So that's a direct quote. I take that to mean that all the other knights of the Round Table swore their men too, but because the numbers they offered were considerably smaller than 20 or 30,000 men, they weren't mentioned specifically.
I think in mine it does say Lancelot promised another 20.
Okay.
And then it was like, and then everybody else also promised some things. But by that count, from yours, he's at 110, I think. And then if Lancelot does give 20, he's at 130 plus whatever. That's a lot of might. That's a significant army.
Pretty big.
Especially for a
big
place
army.
as small as England.
Yeah. What do you suppose that's about? Like, how did they build up? Well, they had time, I guess.
They did have time.
You
They
know?
had years of peace. There was probably a lot of young men that came of fighting age, which back then was like 13.
Oh.
You know, yeah, it's sad. It's sad. But that was seen as a way to elevate your station. I mean, any poor kid could become a page.
Right.
It was unlikely, but it was possible.
Yeah.
And then if you could earn some kind of notoriety or some fame, hey, that was a good way to get a barony. But yeah, they had some years of peace. That probably helped. Also, I mean, they're not promising 20,000 well-trained, well-regulated militiamen. You know,
they're promising 20,000 men.
Yeah,
30,000 men.
I've probably got 500 decent cavalry and then 19,500 conscripted farmers and laborers that I can bring with. And they're like, that works, you know? And granted, people get conscripted all the time. So just because they're a conscript doesn't mean they suck. You know, they're not just some rando. if you've been conscripted more than once, like, no, you're a veteran. You know what you're
You
doing.
presumably had training.
Right. You've had something. You know
Yeah.
how to march in formation. You know how to wield a spear. You've been in battle before.
Probably some healers, probably some bugle
Yeah,
men.
some surgeons, some standard bearers, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's still a very impressive number
Mm.
for as small a place as England is,
Yeah.
and especially against what conceivably the Roman Empire, even the fractured western part of it, could muster.
Yeah. So King Arthur greatly thanked every man who committed their armies to fight for him. He was very cognizant of the fact that, I mean, it's no small thing to go to war with, as you said, the world.
Yeah.
Like this one little place.
And at no cost from King Arthur. They're not even getting paid to do it.
Well, the first guy said at no cost.
Well, that's true.
But I mean, it did say, the narrative did say that the second guy made a similar promise. So
that's true.
So
I think they're ostensibly doing it like, I'll do it at no cost, because if we win, I have so much to gain.
So much.
I mean,
so much.
I could go from a little earldom in England to the governor of an entire province.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I was an earl of Bettany or whatever.
Yeah.
Now I'm the governor of Italy.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's better.
Yeah.
That's much better.
Yeah. So after thanking everyone, he summoned the ambassadors back into his court, and he said to them in front of all of his lords and knights, he said, I want you to go back to your lord, the procurer of the commonweal for the Romans, and tell them this. I owe you nothing. I owe nothing to any prince, nor Christian or heathen. I will, rather, attempt to occupy your obsolete empire, for I am entitled to, by right of my predecessors, sometimes kings of your land. Tell him that I have determined I shall go with my army to Rome, and, by the grace of God, take possession of the empire, and subdue all those that shall rebel. I command him, and all of Rome, that forthwith they pay fealty to me, and recognize me as their emperor and governor, or else suffer the pain that will follow. That's a pretty hard speech.
The world said, you owe us, and Arthur said, the world is mine.
Then, I found amusing, after saying all of that. Then he commanded his treasurer to give the ambassadors extravagant gifts, and to pay for all their travel expenses.
Yes. Because that is the right thing to do for statecraft.
It's just so amusing. Like, it feels contradictory.
Yeah. Man, I can't remember now who said it. It may have been, I want to say it was General Patton, that it costs you nothing to be polite to a man that you're about to kill. And so he's just like, you know what, play nice with Lucius. He is a king, one that I totally plan to usurp and ostensibly murder, but a king nonetheless. So statecraft demands, certain levels of respect be observed.
His ambassadors shall get gifts.
Right.
Doesn't say what the gifts are.
Take them back. And part of it is so that the ambassadors, as we'll read soon, go back and they're like, man, King Arthur's court is like, they're very polite. They've got great manners. Their etiquette is on point. Also, he's got a lot of military might. So, keep that in mind.
Yeah. So then he told Sir Cador, Sir Cador, to escort these ambassadors out of Britain. So they were escorted to the port town of Sandwich, and from there, they traveled by boat back to Italy to speak with their lord, Emperor Lucius. So, I don't know about you, I found the fact that there was a place called Sandwich very amusing, and it took me off guard. So I looked it up. Did you look this up?
No.
So, Sandwich is an actual place. And you may be wondering, audience, why there's a place named after food. The answer is it isn't. It's the other way.
Food is named after the place.
That's right. So the town of Sandwich has actually existed for a very long time. It existed before it was called Sandwich. It was named Sandwich like thousands of years ago. And it still exists today. It's about 5,000 people today. Originally, Sandwich meant literally sandy harbor because it's along this long stretch of sandy shore. So the reason why it seems like a silly name now, is because, sandwiches exist. But they didn't always exist. Sometime, now take this with a grain of salt. This came from a book called Tour to London by this guy Pierre Jean Grossley. In his book, he says that in the 18th century, the 4th Earl of Sandwich, John Montague, he was a gambler. And there was this one day he was playing a card game and he requested that his cook bring him a snack that wouldn't require cutlery. He didn't want, to be distracted from his card game. He just wanted to hold a snack in one hand while he could play games with the other. So to fulfill this request, his cook brought him 2 slices of toasted bread with sliced meat in between. It's not clear if the sandwich was his idea or his cook's idea, but he was he was the Earl, so it became.
So he gets credit.
Yeah, he got credit. It became associated with him, and whenever he was gambling, everyone would say, "I'll have what Sandwich is having," and so. While it sounds silly to us that these ambassadors were shipped out in a place called Sandwich, to them, they weren't thinking about food. They were thinking, oh, okay, I mean, it's literally a sandy harbor. All right, cool, sure. For them, sandwiches wouldn't be invented for another millennium or so, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah. Well, and that makes sense. Like in restaurants, if there's a regular, a patron, that has a particular way they like a food, and that's popular, a lot of the times they'll add that to the menu under that person's name.
Yeah.
Like you could do that at Broadway Diner.
Yeah.
You can get something called and it's somebody's name. It's typical for English nobility to be referred to by their title in place of a name.
Yeah.
So the Earl of Southampton is sometimes just called Southampton.
Yeah.
You'd just be like, hey, Southampton. And he'd be like, yes, that's me. And
That's
he'd
me.
answer to that.
Yeah.
Or Essex or whatever. And so they probably called him Sandwich.
They definitely called him Sandwich.
And then they'd leave and they'd be like, I'd like a sandwich.
I'd like what Sandwich is having.
Right. And so
Give me
that
a
became the
sandwich.
regular order when it was, he's the patron.
Yeah.
He's the Earl.
Yeah.
That became what the item was called because it was the thing that he would get.
And so because of how, that's all shaked out over the ages, there is a very amusing signpost in Sandwich and I'll include a picture of it in the linked up, but there is a signpost that says Ham Sandwich because there is a town near Sandwich called Ham.
So it's ham, arrow, sandwich, arrow. That's very funny.
Well, anyways, getting back to the story itself. These ambassadors, they sailed out of Britain through Sandwich, went back to Italy, went back to Rome, and they relayed Arthur's message to Emperor Lucius, who naturally was very angry to receive it.
How dare he?
Yeah. He had thought Arthur would have given in to his demands like every other king.
Yeah.
One of his ambassadors, a senator, he said, "Oh, sir, that was in vain, My fellows and I were terrified in his presence. I fear you've kicked a hornet's nest, for he says he intends to rule this empire, and I have no doubt that he will come. He's a different kind of man than you might think, and he holds the most noble court in the world. No other kings or princes can compare to his nobility. On New Year's Day, we saw him and his estate, and it was the most royal court we've ever seen. He was served at his table with 9 kings and the noblest group of princes, lords, and knights in the world. Every knight was a lord and sat at a round table. He is the most manly man living and aims to conquer the world. In the face of his courage, the world is a small thing. I advise you to keep your men marching in the mountains because Arthur is a lord to fear."
He made a very good impression.
He sure fucking did.
Yeah.
Lucius says, "Well, before Easter, I will pass the mountains into France." As an aside, I thought it was Gaul. So this is where it gets weird, right? Because throughout this entire story, I noticed this. Gaul is never mentioned again. It's just France.
Mhm.
It's just France now.
Yep.
So
I get the Gauls have been defeated by the Franks.
I guess
and it is now France.
It's France now. Well, anyway, so he says, Lucius says, before Easter, I will pass the mountains into France and steal his lands with Genoese. I'm guessing this is the Lord of Genoa. It's a territory in Italy. Well, anyways, he says, and mighty warriors of Tuscany and Lombardy. I shall send for all of my men and allies of Rome to come to my aid. And so he sent knights as messengers to, well, the entire realm of the Roman Empire, I think, because there's this huge paragraph where it goes on about all of these fucking places, most of them territories that were kingdoms in their own right at the time, but are now, like, don't exist anymore. Like, a ton of places in Africa, India, larger Europe, Alexandria, Damascus, a ton of kingdoms in what is now modern day Turkey, like a ton of kingdoms in what is now modern day Turkey. Portugal, thousands of Spaniards.
Mine name drops Nazareth specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fucking nuts.
I think a lot of that is, part of it might just be like some mental flexing on Thomas Mallory's part. Like, look at all the places that I know about. But it could also narratively function to show, like, this is how vast an area that the Roman Empire currently controls.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it is from Asia Minor all the way to the coast of France. Like, this is, like, it's a huge swath of land.
Calling on tons of places all over the recognized world.
Yeah.
So yeah, after
mine does also specify.
Yeah.
No less than 16 knights with their armies mustered beneath the imperial flag, and 50 of the giants of Guienne, who were so huge that no horse could carry them.
Do you know what mine says?
What?
It says that those giants were children of fiends.
So this was something I looked up because I want to know what words mean. And I was like, knights, giants of Guienne. Where is Guienne? Right?
What is Guienne?
Guienne is not a place.
What is Guienne?
The only thing I can find that exists that is Guienne is actually a Dutch word for no. Now, interestingly, Dutch men are one of the largest men on average in the world.
Okay.
So the giants of Guienne could be Dutch. They have a Dutch name. This is where I get a little conspiracy theory because I think it's fun.
Yeah.
So Guienne is Dutch for no. There was a time around the 15th century called that the English language changed a lot. It was called the Great Vowel Shift, and a lot of vowels kind of changed how they sounded.
Caxton was actually a major contributor to this because he was one of the first publishers, and so like a lot of what he published became like the more established vernacular.
And so, no now, in this time may not have been pronounced the same way we pronounce no in English now. Middle English could have said it differently. So we have giants. Presumably there's still some kind of knight. Knights of no, but not pronounced like no.
Knights of...
The knights who say knee.
A knee. Knee?
The knights who say knee.
The knights who say knee?
From Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Oh, God damn it. I need to watch that
The
again.
Arthurian Monty Python.
Knee.
What is also unique about the knights who say knee? They're twice the size of a regular man.
Oh my God.
They're literally giants.
Oh my God, Zach was gesturing to me like, get it.
The knights who say knee.
The knights who say knee.
The giants of Guienne are the knights who say knee in Monty Python.
Oh my God.
Which, if I'm right, brings a whole new level of appreciation for Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
Because that means they've actually read Le Morte Arthur. They're very familiar with it.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're throwing the giants of Guienne in here somehow. And it's come out the knights who say knee.
Knee. Oh my God.
I love it. I don't know if that's true. I refuse to believe anything else.
Well, apparently they were also children of fiends. So make of that what you will. Well, those 50 giants were Lucius's personal guard.
Nice.
And they were to lead the charge in battle against King Arthur. So with his massive army gathered, when he got word that all of his summons had been answered, he readied his Roman armies and all the people between him and Flanders, which is a modern day, it's modern day northern Belgium.
Yep.
So it's across the English Channel, like just across the English Channel. So he readied all of his men between him and there, and got his 50 giants, traveled through the mountains, besieged a castle in Cologne, a German city. And then once he won the castle, he left in it 200 Saracens or infidels. That's a quote. Saracens or infidels.
Yep.
And then destroyed many countries that King Arthur had won from King Claudius. So that's chapter 2. I think this just kind of really goes to show just how fucking deep shit Arthur's in.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the Saracen, he's got Muslim mercenaries fighting for him.
Yeah.
He's got these giants that are probably Dutch, or presumably, I mean, it was not uncommon to use Norwegian Vikings as mercenaries.
Yeah.
So definitely could have used those. They were very famous mercenaries of the Roman Empire.
We've talked about Saracens before, and I don't think we came to a clear definition of what they are.
I don't think it allows a very clear definition. I think they are non-Christian Middle Eastern people.
Okay.
That's what I think they are.
Okay.
Which means typically Muslim, but also theoretically Jewish or Aryan, or
I don't think they could consider Jews infidels.
Could be Vedic. Infidel just means infidelity. It just means not holding to the faith.
Oh, so then I guess Jews could be infidels.
Yeah,
then.
That's modern times. Only really Islamic jihadists use the term, and they use it for anyone who's not an Islamic jihadist, basically.
Got it.
Because they're not holding to the faith. But in this context, Christianity is using it to describe anyone who's not Christian.
This episode is brought to you by me. I made this show, and it's a pretty shoestring budget. I have a membership to a local studio, Vidwest Studios. That's how I have all the equipment and the space that I need to record. I pay for that. I pay for books, or I get them from the library, and that's about it. So if you want to support the show, there are a few ways to do that. In the episode description, there will be a link to the Patreon. You can pitch in $1 a month, and you'll in return get ad-free episodes. Or you can do more. There's a guy, Josh Hughes. He gives us like $12 a month. We appreciate you, Josh. You're the reason why we pay for the studio at all. But he does not provide enough for us to pay for books necessarily, so you could pitch in and we could pay for books. As well, just do the normal stuff that you could do to support a show, like share your favorite episodes with friends, rate the show on whatever platform you listen to it on. Like if you listen on Spotify, give us a 4 or 5 star rating. If you listen on YouTube, like the episode. Leave comments if whatever platform you're listening to this on allows you to do that. Engage with the show. And also, if you have any book suggestions that you would like us to read, let us know either in the comments or you can email us. We have an email address for the podcast, funk.lit.pod@gmail.com. That is func.lit.pod@gmail.com.
Chapter 3. How King Arthur held a parliament at York, and how he ordained the realm should be governed in his absence.
So this is a very short chapter. Honestly, I think it was just included to answer any wayward questions that people might have.
Just fill in plot holes.
Hey, what about Britain? What had happened to Britain while he was gone? So he commanded his entire retinue to be ready to hold a parliament at York. I take this to mean he wanted to have war talks, basically.
I mean, it's sort of a civics, like governmental discussion of like, hey, how are we going to do this crap while I'm gone? Like, I'm not going to be here, so you guys got to figure out how to. I can't run the entire country and wage this campaign against the entire world.
So when the parliament was over, it was determined that the entire navy would be gathered in 15 days at good old Sandwich. And there he showed his army his plan to conquer the Roman Empire. Then he appointed 2 governors of the realm, Sir Bodwin to counsel, and Sir Constantine to be his successor should he die. He publicly resigned the rule of the kingdom and Guinevere to his governors. This pissed off Sir Lancelot, for he left Sir Tristram with King Mark for the love Beale Isolde. I'm not sure about the meaning of that.
So in mine, it says everybody basically got ready to go.
Yeah.
But it took like 15 days from the time of the parliament when Constantine is named the heir and steward to everyone, rendezvoused at Sandwich ready to go. There was a 15-day gap. And in that 15-day gap, Sir Tristram goes off to King Mark because he's in love with Isolde.
Okay.
The way it poses it is like, and Sir Tristram ran off to King Mark's kingdom, and Lancelot was very mad at him, but he didn't know that Sir Tristram did it for the love of Isolde.
Okay.
And so this, for me, is very funny, because this is like literally the textbook answer for why
Tristram wasn't there?
Well, for why people think romanticism, which is what this could arguably one of the earliest examples of, is bad, is because Sir Tristram's duty was to King Arthur, to the military, to the campaign.
Like, he literally missed out on the Roman campaign.
Right. For lust, basically. Because it's not even his wife. No. It's his uncle's wife.
Oh, no.
That he's in love with.
I didn't know that.
Yes. Isolde is not his.
Oh, no.
And so the text like justifies, it's like Lancelot was mad, but he didn't know. As if, well, him being in love with this woman justifies the actions.
I mean, for Lancelot, it would have.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The text poses it as if that is a justifiable reason.
Yeah.
And so the adversaries of that would say that's not a good reason.
No.
And generally the push against romanticism is like a morally corrupting idea or ideology is it conflates lust and love. And that it's like love is noble and should be fought for, and most people would agree with that. But when they say love is also Sir Tristram cuckolding his uncle, then it's like, well, that's not true. That's not noble at all. That's terrible.
Yeah, on a more modern example would be, teenagers supposedly falling in love for the first time.
Yeah. It's the passion, it's the emotive of it, and that's a part of love.
Yeah.
But that's not all of love.
Yeah.
And so the moral purists are like, romanticism sucks because it took like the self-sacrifice and the nobility out of love, and it made it just wanting to fuck people.
Yeah, I mean, there's love in that, supposedly.
Well, having sex can be loving. Yeah. But that doesn't mean having sex is by necessity loving.
Right.
You can use people for sex too.
You sure can.
So that's the argument, and I just thought it was funny because I knew that argument, and then I read that and I was like, there it is. That's the thing.
Right there.
Like they point to it and they go, see? Romanticism is the worst.
Romanticism is bad.
The degradation of our society began in the 15th century.
Well, earlier than that, this is just reporting of earlier tales.
That's true. In the 11th century, everything was better in the year 900.
Everything was better in the year 900. So
the good old days.
Well, so Arthur proclaims, like, these are the people that are going to be in charge. I leave my wife and my lands to them. Guinevere was so upset about all of this. Like,
I think in mine it says she fainted.
Yeah.
Like she didn't even get to say goodbye to Arthur. She was just like, oh, on her chaise.
Mine said her ladies had to escort her to her chambers, but I see both of those qualifying. I imagine she...
her ladies in waiting carried her, like, half-conscious, like, oh my God, where's those?
Or maybe, like, put her in a palanquin or something.
Yeah. Like, get her out of here. She can't handle this. She's very upset.
And so the king left, and the kingdom was left in the care of Sir Bodwin and Constantine. Now, if I remember correctly, Bodwin was the warden of the north.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. So that makes sense.
And Constantine is his next of kin, sans like an uncle. Because I think Constantine is his cousin. So his uncle would technically be his next of kin, but his uncle's pretty old.
So Constantine's the next legitimate
Yes.
person.
Yeah.
Because he has
Yeah.
bastard children.
Yeah. Well, because he could leave it to his uncle, but I think he was wisely like, yeah, but he's a little on in years.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, he's going to reign for what, 10, 15 years?
Yeah.
If the country wants stability in light of my murder,
Yeah.
let's give him someone that's going to be around for a while.
Sure.
So he picks the younger of the two.
So right before he leaves, while he's on his horse, you know, just picture him on a massive war horse, make him real tall. He called out loudly to everyone in Sandwich, "If I die in this journey, I will that Sir Constantine be mine heir and king crowned of this realm as next of my blood." And then he and his army left Sandwich's harbor with a massive retinue of ships, galleys, cogs, which are small boats, and dromounds, which are war vessels on the English Channel. That's where they all cross the English Channel. And that's how that chapter goes. Very short chapter.
Yeah. Really just like, let's tie up any sort of political problems so we can get on to the bloodshed.
Indeed.
Chapter 4. How King Arthur, being shipped and lying in his cabin, had a marvelous dream, and of the exposition thereof.
So this is also another very short chapter, and I think this was put in here maybe as a way of foreshadowing a
Yes.
little bit. Like
Yeah.
it's another one of these prophetic dreams that Arthur has before he does something big.
Having the prophetic dreams, like regularly inserting them, is sort of a narrative device to show that what Arthur is doing is divinely inspired or divinely supported.
Yeah.
If he just did it and succeeded, then you could say like, oh, well, he did it because Arthur's just so great. But like, no, you had a prophetic dream. If
Yeah.
you're a Christian, you believe that means
Yeah.
it's from God.
Yeah.
And so, well, God has ordained that this would happen.
Yeah.
Which has the twofold thing of being like, and therefore you are right to do it.
Yeah.
And so like that excuses any of the atrocities that are about to happen because God willed it. But also, when you succeed, you don't get to brag about it. It wasn't you.
God willed it.
You have to, at the end, be like, and thanks be to God for allowing it.
Well, we know that's going to happen because Arthur, as we've established, is a very meek person.
That's right. And the meek will inherit the earth.
Mm-hmm. So, during this voyage, Arthur was sleeping. He dreamt of a dragon with, a blue dragon, rather, with golden wings and claws and a tattered tail, flooding his lands with fire. And then, out of the mist, this big black boar with hoofs the size of posts appears. It's rugged and foul and roaring, challenging this dragon. The dragon swoops down, breathing fire, and when it swoops down, the boar punctured the dragon's breast with great big tusks. All this blood starts coming out of the dragon, and the blood turned the sea red. This dragon flew up high, swooped down again, massive wings, bringing like this massive gale of wind. The dragon breathes fire again, and the boar turned to ashy powder, spreading out all along the sea. And that's the dream. So King Arthur wakes up feeling pretty embarrassed about what he had just dreamt about for some reason. He was like very abashed. He was like, oh, whoa, that's okay.
Yeah.
I imagine he doesn't have prophetic dreams often. Like, we always read about them, but,
yeah.
you know.
Well, they're not telling us his regular dreams.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. So he sent for a, quote, wise philosopher, end quote.
Yeah. Important to remember that damned dream reader, Merlin,
is gone.
Is no longer around. He's trapped in the cave. But he needs a dang dream reader.
So yeah, you got a wise philosopher to read his dang dream. The man told Arthur, "Sir, the dragon you dream of symbolizes you sailing here. The colors of the dragon's wings symbolize the many realms you have won. His tattered tail signifies the knights of the round table. The boar the dragon fought seems a sign of some tyrant that torments the people, or perhaps you are to fight a giant. They are horrible and abominable, you know, and without peers. Have no doubts about this dream. You are the conqueror." So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I want to read my version of the description of this dream.
What's your version say about it?
First of all, just a heads up because it's a little confusing. I think mine it is either a typo or at some point somebody mixed a metaphor
Okay.
and they got it wrong. So it says the fleet set sail that night. Arthur, asleep in his cabin, was disturbed by a strange dream. He watched a dragon flying across the sky from the west. West being where Britain is. So the dragon's coming from the west. West is where England is. It's where Arthur's from. And its appearance filled the onlookers with awe. So there are onlookers.
Yeah, makes sense.
There's other people. The head shone like blue enamel. Very valuable.
Right.
The shoulders like gold. The belly like mail. I assume some kind of silver. And the tail was multicolored with jagged points at the edges. The feet were covered with sable, and the claws were of gold.
Sable is black,
Black,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
From the jaws issued flames at each breath, so every time it breathed, more flames.
Literally fire breathing.
Yeah. Meeting the dragon from the east was a terrible bear. So from the east, Rome, we have a bear.
A bear, not a boar. Okay.
Huge and black as a storm cloud, with paws staunch as posts, fur shaggy and gait shambling. As he moved, he uttered a dreadful roar. So you have these two massive animals, both very terrifying.
Yeah.
Twice, the dragon attacked the bear, rising up to a tremendous height and then swooping down with outspread claws and fiery breath. The bear resisted the first attack and wounded the dragon with his tusks. That's why it's a mixed metaphor. Bears don't have tusks.
No.
So that was a little confusing for me the first time I read it. But then I looked it up and other versions use boar, and I was like, okay, there's a typo, and someone put bear instead of boar. They just put an E instead of an O.
Either that or it's a bear from like Avatar.
Right, or this is a different kind of bear.
Yeah. Like a dire bear.
Yeah. Wounded the dragon with his tusks so that blood spurted all over him and down into the sea beneath. I guess they could also mean tusks as just like very large teeth protruding from its mouth.
Yeah.
Because that's what a tusk is. But anyway. But with the second attack, the dragon ripped the bear from head to tail and then burnt him to ashes, which were blown away by the breeze.
Okay, so very similar descriptions.
Yeah. A little bit more multicolored.
Yeah.
And so the colors of the dragon represent the different colors of the standards of the many armies that he's leading.
Makes sense.
So he's not just Arthur. He's this coalition of sovereign kings and knights that are following him by choice.
Right.
As opposed to the bear/boar, which is one color. It's just one sort of amalgamated people that he's against.
Whereas the boar, I'm going to go with boar.
Yeah, I think boar makes more sense.
The boar, which represents Rome,
right,
is more uniform.
Yeah. So the juxtaposition of the two animals, right? Dragons are mythical, supernatural things. They fly, they breathe fire.
Yeah.
Like they are the reason that so many royal houses use dragons in iconography is because they're such a symbol of power.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they can fly means they're sort of above the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a force from above, angelic in a way, but like fiercely.
I've never heard them interpreted that way, but go on.
Well, it only works in contrast to something else.
Sure.
The contrast is with a boar or a bear, but we're going to go with boar because I think it makes more sense for the metaphor.
Bears don't have tusks.
Right. So the boar, we know now today scientifically that this isn't true, but in comparison to a dragon, is a stupid animal.
Yeah.
They're dumb.
Yeah.
Pigs are actually very smart, but not the point. Compared to a dragon, which arguably has human or higher intelligence.
Yes.
They're a dumb animal. They're beastly. They're smelly. They're dirty. They're very
aggressive,
reliant on brute force, and not much strategy.
Yeah.
Boars in general are cannibalistic. They'll eat other pigs.
Yes, they will.
They'll eat anything.
Yes,
They're
they
indiscriminate, filthy animals.
And there's a reason why they eat slop.
Symbolically.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I say the boar works better for the metaphor is that pigs are also almost unanimously worldwide sacrificial animals.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, really.
And the fact that this pig is first slaughtered and then burnt is very in keeping with Jewish and Christian tradition for burnt sacrifices.
Yeah.
You know, you would bleed the animal first and then you would burn it. That's the burnt offering that they would offer in the Jewish temple under the law of Moses. So that's why I say the boar works better. Because a bear, that tends to not make as much sense. I mean, you could still say, well, it's beastly, it's of the world, it's an animal, it's instinctual. Sure. But then the sacrificial aspect of that metaphor gets lost.
I mean, I can kind of see why they would use bear if it wasn't for the tusks.
They're more intimidating. Bears are scarier.
But, I mean, bears also have an association with, like, republics, you know?
Yes.
Well, so, anyways, I mean, I'm not sure there's much more we can interpret there.
No, I think it's pretty direct, but it is a very interesting metaphor. I love that.
Yeah.
The dream they put in there. It's awesome.
So, sometime after Arthur talks with this unnamed philosopher, they see land. They sail to Barflet in Flanders. Barflet is a port. Flanders is a place in France.
Mm-hmm.
In Barflet, many of his lords and armies were already there and preparing. Arthur had told them to go there ahead of him, to prepare. And at the end of this chapter, they have successfully crossed the English Channel.
Chapter 5. How a man of the country told to him of a marvelous giant, and how he fought and conquered him.
So, they come across a husbandman, which is like a farmer who works his lands with just his family. So, like, Sir Ares would have been a husbandman.
Yeah.
From book 3. So, this French farmer, he approaches Arthur's camp and tells Arthur directly of how there's this great giant that has been killing and eating many people. This giant has been gorging itself on children for 7 years, to the point that there's no children left.
Mm-hmm.
And now, the farmer says, this giant has taken the Duchess of Brittany while she was riding with her entourage. He's taken the Duchess to his home in the mountains to ravish and lie by her till her life's end. In other words, he raped this woman until she died.
Yes.
It's brutal. Many of her people, more than 500 of them, followed her, but they couldn't rescue her. They left her shrieking and crying. I suppose by now he must have killed her and having ado with her. She was my cousin's wife, Sir Howell. I consider him my blood. Now, as you are a rightful king, please have pity on this lady and get revenge, for as you are, a noble conqueror.
I find it odd that the Duchess of Brittany is in France.
Why?
Because why?
Well, Little Britain is a province in France. Brittany is Little Britain.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I looked into it.
Okay.
I
didn't know that.
Yeah.
Because there's the king of Little Brittany at the round table meeting, and he pledges troops.
Yeah, so
Okay.
Little Britain is a province in France,
That makes
belongs
sense.
to Britain.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's in France, it's
Gotcha,
still
gotcha,
one of the
gotcha.
places Arthur owns.
I didn't know that little bit of geography.
Yeah.
So I was confused first. Like, I thought maybe it was a shoehorn in an attempt to explain why Arthur was interested at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it was like, hey, some foreign lady got trapped, he's like, well, I guess knightly honor demands I help a damsel, but also, not my people, not my problem.
So so this next bit was a little bit confusing, so I'm curious to know what your book says about it. In response to what this farmer tells Arthur, he says, alas, this is a terrible misfortune. I would rather than the best realm that I had been a furlong way to have rescued that lady. So I've tried to parse it as best I can. Like, it seems to me that what he's saying is I would be eager to do this thing if I were in my realm and she were nearby. Like, I think that's what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
A furlong is an eighth of a mile. And to fore means before. So, it's...
Yeah.
I don't know. It was a very odd sentence.
Yeah, mine, it's very succinct, where he just says, alas, I would give my kingdom to have saved her.
I would give my kingdom to have saved her.
So maybe what he's saying is I would lay in front of him as an offering this much property to have been able to save her.
Right. So then Arthur says to the farmer, can you take me to the giant's haunt? And the farmer says, yes, sir. Look over there. You see those 2 huge fires? You'll find him there, and more treasure than all of France, I think. Now that Arthur had his side quest, he went back to his tent. He called for his brother Kay and also Sir Bedivere. And he told them, we're going giant hunting. get horses ready for you and me. After Evensong, we'll ride out. I imagine Kay was thrilled. So I have a textbook definition of Evensong, but if you are familiar with it, please.
No, I'd like to.
So Evensong is like an evening church service where everyone sings psalms or hymns or chants, stuff like that. It specifically happens in the evening.
Yes. So this is generally only done by, I guess for the loose term, I'll use the word clerics in the Catholic Church, at least. Most parish priests don't do it, so the guys that actually offer mass at your local church don't do it. But there's a form of prayer called the Divine Office, and it's actually 7 prayer services throughout the day.
Okay.
And Evensong is either the last or one of the last ones.
Okay.
But if you were to go to like a Benedictine monastery or a Trappist monastery, they are very regimented. Like the very first one happens at like 5:30 or 6 in the morning, and so every one of the brothers and the fathers have to get up and they go into the chapel, they sing their psalms, they do their readings, they chant. Usually they chant the readings, they don't just read them out. And then they'll break for a couple hours, they'll go about do whatever to do, and then the bells toll and they go back and they do the next one. They do that 7 times every day.
Jeez.
And that's just seen as, it's like their spiritual work, and in it they're sort of lifting their prayers for the whole world.
A little bit different than what they were doing here.
Yeah, this seems more like it's just a way to help regiment
Morale.
these men
Yeah.
while they're, kind of a keep them out of trouble, keep them busy
Yeah.
type of thing.
Yeah.
But also, this is a Christian army, they're like, we're going to tie this. They could be seeing this as a way to pray for their success.
They had just gotten there.
Yeah, we're lifting our voices to God in hopes that he will be with us and see us through successfully on our campaign.
So anyways, Arthur went to Evensong, which makes sense.
Yeah, gotta go to that.
While Kay and Bedivere actually, did all the hard work of getting everything ready for this adventure.
They may have been happy to get out of going to Evensong, though.
Maybe.
They might have been bummed, but they might have been like, Evensong's rough, dude.
So Kay, he got all that sorted along with Bedivere. Arthur, after Evensong, armors up, equips his sword, his shield, and they all went out to the fires the farmer told Arthur about. I have the impression they snuck away.
Probably.
Well,
Well, you can't imagine that. I mean, Arthur has to have some kind of personal guard.
Yeah.
Of which I'm pretty sure Kay would be in charge of.
Yeah.
But it's unlikely that any responsible, non-commissioned officer in there would just let the king and his brother go
Yeah.
by themselves into the wilderness.
Yeah. So they get to these fires that the farmer pointed out to Arthur. They dismount their horses. Arthur tells Kay and Bedivere to wait here while he goes into the lair on his own. So he goes up the mountain until he got to one of the 2 enormous fires. There he found a widow mourning by a fresh grave. Arthur says hello and then demands to know why she's mourning, which I think is a little bit much. I think, he maybe demanding, but
It's poor word choice, but he's just like, what happened?
yeah.
Why are you crying?
Well, so I think demanding actually is a good word choice here because of the way she responds. She says, "Sir Knight, speak softly. There is a devil nearby, and if he hears you, he will come and kill you. I see you're upset. Why are you here at this mountain?" And this is my interpretation because I'm reading very archaic wording and translating as best I can. I think what she said here was, if you are as old as you look, you will not be able to fight this devil. What the text said, for if you were such 50 as ye be. So I think she's saying, you look 50. If you are 50, you can't fight this thing.
I think what she's saying is that if you were 50 men, if you were you, but 50 of you, you would still lose.
That makes more sense.
I think that's because I don't think Arthur's 50 yet.
No.
Now, he might look pretty haggardly. Being the head of state is a stressful job.
Right.
But I think what she's saying is you look pretty good. But even if there were 50 of you exactly, you'd still lose.
Okay, so that I like that. I like that. If there were 50 of you, you would not be able to fight this devil. In this grave is a dead duchess, the fairest in all the world, the wife of Sir Howell, Duke of Brittany. He has raped and murdered her, slitting her throat to the navel. So if I'm reading this right, Arthur decided to, in this moment, pretend he is someone else.
Well, it's generally good practice to not announce, hey, I'm a king, when you're by yourself.
So Arthur says, Dame, I am sent from the noble conqueror King Arthur to bargain the tyrant for his people. Dame, by the way, means mistress of the house.
Yep.
So
I also wonder if there's a bit of like prideful self-preservation in that Arthur's like, I don't know if I'll actually win this, but if I lose, I don't want people to know King Arthur lost.
right.
So like, if I just get my ass whooped, I could pretend, somebody, Sir Bedivere got bested by a giant, which, it happens.
Right.
No one's going to really blame Sir Bedivere. But if Arthur loses to a giant, it's like, oof, morale for this campaign dropped.
Specifically under these circumstances.
Right.
Yeah. Like, he declares war against the Emperor of Rome and then dies
And
fighting
can't
a
beat
giant.
one giant.
Before he even gets to the fighting.
Right.
Yeah. So he tells this woman, I come from King Arthur to bargain the tyrant for his people. I'm not sure if he was talking about the giant or Lucius. I think in this context he was talking about the giant.
Yeah.
So the woman, she says, shame on such negotiations. He will not negotiate with the king nor anyone else. But if you've brought Arthur's wife, Dame Guinevere, he would be happier than if you came to him offering half of France. Be careful and don't get too close, for he has defeated 15 kings and fashioned himself a jeweled cloak embroidered with their beards, which those kings sent him last Christmas, so he wouldn't kill their people. If you will, speak with him over by the great fire. He is eating now. All right, Arthur says, I shall deliver my message despite your fearful words. So he rides over.
Yeah.
He crests the hill and rides over to the other fire.
So a difference between our two texts, and one that I think is significant, is that this giant is specifically identified by the man that comes to warn Arthur as a giant of Guienne.
Oh.
Not
okay.
necessarily one of the ones with Emperor Lucius, but at least the same kind of person.
So in your text, it's establishing like why these giants should be feared.
Right.
Because one giant is terrorizing 15 kingdoms.
Yeah. Well, and specifically in mine, the emperor says that each of those giants is worth 50 men. So when Arthur climbs this hill, and this lady's like, if you were 50, it still wouldn't matter. They're reinforcing the idea that one of these is worth 50.
Okay.
Okay. And so it also then clarifies that, like, if Arthur can kill this guy by himself, then Arthur's worth even more than that.
Okay. Interesting.
But there's also a few more subtle differences. The man also specifically identifies where he is as St. Michael's Mount, which is interesting.
Mine talked about that, but I didn't understand it.
Yeah, so the name of the mountain that this giant is on is St. Michael's Mount.
Oh, okay.
There are 2 fires on it. He goes up, but he finds the woman grieving. He comes to the top. There's 2 fires. There's 2 wells and a freshly dug grave.
Okay.
And the woman is grieving by a well. So we again have this reiteration of adventurers being kicked off by women at wells. Because otherwise, why is a well at the top of a mountain? That's the least convenient place to have a well.
Yeah, I mean, it's so
you have
high
to dig
up.
the deepest.
Yeah.
And you have to then hike uphill to go get your water.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't make sense, other than there's an association with women beginning quests and they're at wells. So the well has to be there.
That seems to have been something that was put in later, because mine makes no mention of a well.
But the reason I think I like it is there's 2 wells, but there's only 1 woman.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a freshly dug grave.
Mm-hmm.
So in my version, it also doesn't specify whether or not the Lady Howl has died yet.
Right.
Just that she's been taken, and his intention is to ravish her until death. And so Arthur's going to be like, oh, I hope I can save her. But when he gets to the top of the mountain, there's 2 wells,
Not only one
one
lady.
living woman and 1 grave.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of, I think,
So in
be
your
it, I'll be short term, foreshadowing of, oh no.
so in your version, the widow does not specify that this is the dead
No, she
Duchess.
does, but it describes the scene first. So it
Okay.
gives the reader the opportunity to be like, uh-oh,
Okay.
what happened?
Okay.
And then the woman identifies herself not as Lady Howl, and you go,
Gotcha.
oh shit. And then she says Lady Howl has...
Which is why
Passed.
Arthur calls her dame. He assumes this is the Duchess.
Right. Well, and this
Okay.
guy has a tendency of kidnapping noble ladies, so she could still be a noble lady.
That's true, but she
Um,
doesn't like establish that.
Yeah. And then when they're talking, she's like, keep your voice down. He might hear us. So that's all pretty
He's
much the
just
same.
across the
And
hill.
she's got the smaller fires. He's over by the bigger fire. But she specifies, like, he's over by the bigger fire with 6 children roasting on spits, turned by 4 maidens whom he plans to...
She tells that.
Yeah, she's describing the situation over at the other fire.
Interesting, because she, in my version, does not do that. Arthur just comes across the scene.
Yeah. No, she forewarns him. Hey, it's gruesome over there.
Okay. So in my version, he crests the hill on the mountain and he sees the giant sitting at the base of the fire. And it does a great job, like, just describing this. He was gnawing on a human limb
Yep.
and baking the rest of these corpses, with the fire. He was naked. He was
Mhm.
dirty and naked, and there were 3 pretty damsels turning 3 spits. And those spits had 12, quote, young children late born like young birds, end quote. Fucking gross.
That is
Fucking
a
disgusting.
graphic image.
That is probably the
It's-
most graphic this has gotten yet.
And it really drives home how disgusting and vile
And depraved.
that we are meant to see these giants of Guine.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, this is a typical giant of Guine. This is our first, like, sight of what one of these men are. And they're just these giant, naked, filthy rapists and cannibals.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I don't like these guys very much.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So I don't feel at all bad when
Fucking-
Arthur's like, slaughter them.
Yeah. So Arthur sees this, and he thinks only of the damsels and the children. His heart couldn't stand it, so he immediately...
Could yours?
No,
You
I would be
know?
mortified. I'd have ran away.
Yeah.
But,
We're not Arthur.
We're not
I don't
Arthur.
have Excalibur.
Arthur calls out, "You who use the world, die a short, shameful death. The devil has your soul. Why else would you have murdered these young, innocent children and murdered this duchess? Get up and get dressed, you glutton, for this day you shall die by my hand."
Arthur doesn't stand for bullshit.
He sure
Okay.
fucking doesn't, man. He knows what's right, and he knows what's wrong, and he stands for what's right, and he
That's
kills
right.
what's wrong.
That's a fact.
So the giant, this disgusting, gluttonous, naked, raping, cannibalizing monster takes his great club and strikes Arthur hard enough that his coronal crown
Helmet with
a crown,
sort of crown on it. Yeah.
it fell off his head.
Yeah.
The king strikes back, carving his belly and cutting off his genitors, so I had to do a little bit of leaps of logic here. I looked up what genitors meant. It means creator, so I think it's a euphemism for his dick.
It's his penis. Or testicles.
Yeah.
Or testicles.
Probably
or
both.
Or
Probably all the testicles,
Yeah.
the whole package.
Yep.
The stick and the berries. That and his belly just sliced off, and the giant's guts and entrails fall to the ground. The giant drops his club, lifts King Arthur up in a bear hug, and squeezes him hard enough to start crushing ribs. The maidens fall to their knees and pray that Jesus would comfort Arthur. Arthur starts twisting and turning, writhing in the giant's arms, and they start to roll down the hill. You know, Arthur's back is hitting the ground, and then he's up in the air. Like, they keep, like, tumbling down like that in this bear hug. And they roll all the way down to the shore. And while they're struggling, Arthur kills him with his dagger.
Yeah. So in this version, it separates the two injuries. So he takes the hit. He's able to block it somewhat with his shield, glances off his head, but it throws his helmet.
Yeah.
And then he makes the first cut and severs the genitals.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't specify testicles or penis or both. I'm going to say all of it.
Yeah.
Because I prefer that. Because fuck this guy.
Fuck this guy.
And what a befitting first maiming for a rapist.
Yeah.
Like, let's first get rid of that.
You're done.
Now,
I'm done with that.
Anything else that happens now, even if I ultimately lose this fight and you survive,
No more raping.
There's no more raping happening. Great. I like the priorities here. Then he swings his club and misses, and then he guts him. So then all his intestines spill out. And instead of grabbing him, I think it says that he throws Arthur, and it's so hard that it breaks ribs.
Okay.
And then they come back together, they struggle, they're falling down the hill, and Arthur manages to draw his dagger, and he's just stabbing him.
Just the whole time they're going down.
Yeah, he's just on the way down the hill.
That was my first interpretation of it, that he was, like, while they were rolling down the hill, he was just stabbing this giant. Yeah. But then, like, I don't know, like, when I was reading it again,
it's totally possible in a situation like that. You're lucky if you get 1 or 2 stabs in.
Yeah.
Because it's very disorienting.
Mm-hmm.
But I imagine he was trying to stab him the whole time, at least. How successful he was, I guess.
So by a stroke of very good luck, I wasn't clear on if Arthur killed this thing, or if when he gets down the hill, Sir Kay and Sir Bedivere, luckily, were already there. So they saw his struggle and ran to help him. So I'm not clear on if the giant was already dead, or if, because what he says here, he says to Kay, he orders Kay to cut off the giant's head and set it on a spear. So I feel like the thing had to already be dead, because he talks a lot here. What he says is he orders Kay to cut off the giant's head, to set it on a spear, to show it to Sir Howell, and to tell him that his enemy is dead, and then to have his head bound to a barbican, which is like, I looked up what a barbican is. It's like a fancy gatehouse with a few, like, towers on it. Mm-hmm. So it'd be fitting for a giant's head to just be skewered on a tower. Yeah. And then he says, do that so all the people can see and behold it. Also, go up that mountain, get me my sword and shield, and the giant's iron club. As for the treasure up there, you two can have it. I don't want anything other than the club and the kirtle, which has 2 meanings. It can mean a woman's loose gown or a tunic, so I assume it's the giant's tunic.
Yeah, I don't think he would want the...
This was the fiercest giant I've ever fought, save maybe for that one in the Araby mountain. But no, this one was greater and fiercer. So I feel like the thing had to already be dead, and he was just telling Kay, like, after the fight, cut this thing's head off.
So... this is what mine says.
Yeah.
All right. We got the women praying. They struggled, came to the edge of the hill, started rolling down over rough boulders and through the bushes. Arthur managed to draw his dagger and drove it again and again between the giant's ribs. By the time they reached the bottom of the slope, at the very point where Sir Kay and Sir Bedivere were still waiting, the giant was dead.
Okay.
But this is what I thought was super funny. God save us, exclaimed Sir Kay. Our king has been killed by this giant, and now surely it will be our turn. Because any giant that could kill King Arthur, well, I mean, what chance do we stand?
Wait, so Kay thinks Arthur's dead.
Kay thinks Arthur's dead. Not so, shouted Arthur cheerfully. I have just dragged this saint down from his retreat at the top of the hill. But now help me, I pray you. So I think he's like trapped under the giant, which is why they would have thought he was dead.
Yeah.
And why he had to be like, help me, because he's stuck under this. In mine, it specifies he's 30 feet tall, or more than 30 feet tall.
I love that they're adding this little bit of levity
in
your version. That was not in mine at all.
But this is the part that made me laugh. What a foul monster it is, said Sir Bedivere, as he extricated Arthur from the dead giant. If such are the saints in God's heaven, I should prefer not to go there. Now, the reason that's funny is I looked up St. Michael's Mount.
Uh-huh.
That's a real place in England, or maybe it's Scotland. It's a tidal island, not the place they're talking about. But that's because the French suck. Take that, France. In France... there is a place called Mount Saint-Michel, because in France, everything has to be different. It's Mount, maybe they pronounce it Saint-Michel. I don't know. It's French. I'm not very good at French. So Saint Michael is the one that literally casts Lucifer out.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of iconography. We even have in Victor's room, we've got like a 14-inch little statuette that's
That's baby Victor.
That's baby Victor. A very traditional icon of Saint Michael casting out Lucifer. And so it's Saint Michael with like angel wings spread. He's wearing like Roman centurion armor.
You're gonna have to include a picture of that for the link.
Yeah, I can take a picture of it.
Cool.
And I also think it's based on like a very famous, I think, Caravaggio painting. I'm not positive it's by Caravaggio.
Okay.
But anyway, and he's like standing on Lucifer's head. And Lucifer's like, you know, kind of whiny demon Lucifer.
Sure.
Like he's got his little bat wings and his tiny horns, and he like looks terrified as he's looking up. Yeah, because St. Michael's standing on his face.
Yeah.
but he's like got his sword drawn, like ready to plunge it into him. And it's this very iconic Catholic art. And so the idea that Arthur is sort of the stand-in, the mortal incarnation of the spirit of St. Michael here, and the giant is, you know, the son of a fiend, a devil, and they fall from the top of the mountain, and Arthur's the one who threw him down.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it fits very well, that sort of idea of
That
the
symbolism.
agent of God casting out the agent of evil from the high place to the low.
Should we read too much into that? In order to do that, he also had to fall?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Chapter 6. How King Arthur sent Sir Gawain and other to Lucius, and how they were assailed and escaped with worship.
So he gets these tidings from these messengers, and he decides to delegate. He had, after all, just been wounded in a battle with a giant, which I think the implications of that really do influence how this campaign goes. Because before the campaign even starts, he gets pretty severely wounded in battle. Like,
Yeah,
if you
broken
have-
ribs suck.
Broken ribs suck.
And if you-
never had a
Yeah.
broken rib, have you had a broken rib?
No, I've been for separated ribs, but never broken.
I've never had broken ribs, but my dad, he was in a car accident once, broke his sternum.
Ooh, that's tough.
That's the center of your breastplate.
Yeah.
It is awful. Like, you
Yeah.
can't move. You can't do anything.
I mean, he's lucky
Like-
he didn't get paralyzed or something. That's terrifying.
He was very lucky he didn't
Yeah.
get paralyzed. Like, I remember I was taking care of him for several weeks after that. He could barely move. Like, getting up, getting down was awful for him. I remember there was this one moment of sheer frustration. There was literal tears in his eyes because he couldn't open a jar of pickles. He was like, please help me. I can't open this.
This gets into a deeper, like, men's psychology aspect
Yeah.
of when we can't feel useful,
Yeah.
we feel worthless.
Yeah.
Where it's like, that's why a lot of old men really struggle,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like once they can't do things for themselves or for others, their self-worth plummets.
Right. So none of that is discussed here, but I imagine that
Oh, he's
Arthur
got to
was
feel it.
feeling a
Yeah.
lot of
He
this.
started this campaign. Everyone was rallying behind him. And now he's like, I can't even. Could you imagine trying to ride a horse in full armor with broken ribs?
You can't do it. You
That
can't,
would be-
it would be so fucking painful.
You if you were an average man, you are passing out from the pain. Just
Yeah.
the constant jarring of a slow trot on a horse.
So yeah, naturally he had to delegate. In addition to Sir Gawain, mentioned by the voice of Camelot, Sir Bors, Sir Lionel, Sir Benevere, they were all called upon. He told them, go straight to Sir Lucius and Burgoyne and tell him to make like a tree and leave. If he doesn't, tell him to fight you and leave these poor people alone. Now that Sir Gawain and his entourage had their quest, they armored up, mounted their horses, they traveled into a green forest where they saw many pavilions of many colors in a meadow by a river. Emperor Lucius's pavilion, naturally, was in the middle of all the pavilions. You could tell because it was bigger and had a big banner with an eagle on it.
Mm-hmm.
So the knights discussed who should be the messengers as they approached this tent. it was agreed that Sir Gawain and Sir Bors would do it. This makes sense to me because Gawain is a pighead. And Sir Bors, I don't know much about Sir Bors, but I know he's not King Bors.
Right.
He this is Sir Bors de Ganis.
Yeah.
Different guy.
Yep.
So those two, they go into this tent on horseback, and because, you know, it's a big tent, and they say to Emperor Lucius, "In King Arthur's name, stay out of his lands, or we'll fight you." To which Emperor Lucius answers, "You shall go back to your lord, and you will say to him that I shall subdue him and all of his lands." To which Sir Gawain angrily says back, "I would rather fight you than all of France." And Sir Bors says, "And so had I, rather than all of Little Britain or Burgoyne." And then Sir Gainus, nearly cousin to the emperor. So I should explain this. There's this term that comes up quite a few times in this book called nigh cousin. Nigh meaning nearly. So nearly cousins, meaning that this guy, by my interpretation, might as well be family.
I just think he's a distant relative, you know?
Or
like
that.
Second cousin, third cousin.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, this guy, he opens his big mouth and he says, "Behold how these Britons be full of pride and boast, and they brag as though they bear up all the world."
A fair criticism of Gawain.
In response, Sir Gawain drew out his sword and cut off Gainus's head.
Fair.
And then they turned their horses out and rode away.
As if to prove his point.
They crossed the river and go up through the woods until they caught up with Sir Lionel and Sir Bedivere. The Romans, they followed quickly behind.
Of course.
On both horseback and on foot. And then Sir Bors, he turns quickly and he kills one that was just behind him with a spear. And
good tactic.
So then, this is a direct quote, "Then came Caliburn, one of the strongest of Pavy, and smote down many of Arthur's knights." Sir Bors saw what he was doing, went toward him, and struck him down. Caliburn, dead. Sir Feldenac wanted revenge on Gawain for Gainus's death. Didn't happen. Gawain killed him too. He struck down with his sword, quote, "which stroke stinted not till it came to his breast," which is a very flowery way of saying when Gawain struck down, his sword didn't stop going down till it was halfway lodged in this guy's torso.
Love it.
So anyways, yeah, Gawain, he goes back to his friends. He and his friends break the Romans' charge, hacks and slashes at them, sends them running back to their tents. Then those Romans came back with even more Romans, and the sheer numbers of centurions took Sir Bors and Sir Beryl. To be clear, I don't know who that is. I'm starting to wonder if it wasn't just these four guys, if this is one of those situations where even though these four knights went, they also went with an entourage.
Yeah, I'm sure they didn't travel alone.
Right. So, and the reason why I think that is because they keep using this word bushment, which means ambush.
Yep.
So it mentioned that Gawain and Bors, they ran on horseback back to their bushment.
Yeah, I think in mine it specifies before they went in to deliver the message, they're like, "Hey, this could go south. Set up this ambush here.
Mm-hmm.
And if this goes poorly, we're going to run back to here.
Yeah.
And then your guys are going to cover us so that we don't die."
So anyway, Sir Gawain, he takes down this guy, Sir Idris, the good knight, and then drew his sword.
Not a great knight, but he was good.
And so there's this weird thing that keeps coming up in this book where Mallory is going to go on about Gawain's sword, right?
Yeah.
There's a couple times this happens. The first time here, all he says is Gawain draws out his own sword, Galatine, his good sword, and then went after the knights that took Bors and Beryl. Gawain kills the guy that took Bors and brings Bors back. Sir Idris did the same for Beryl. So the battle became great, which I take to mean became an encampment that lasted for several days.
Yeah, I'm sure the battle just took way longer than they were expecting.
Yeah.
There was a lot of guys involved that they probably weren't counting on.
Yeah, the thing I'm noticing is whenever a battle is referred to as great, that means it's not short.
Yeah, it's significant.
Yeah. So after, I think, 2 or 3 days, Sir Gawain sent a messenger to King Arthur to send for reinforcements and supplies because, quote, I am sore wounded and our prisoners may pay goods out of number. I think that means our prisoners may want to join our ranks. I don't know. Maybe it's just like
it sounds to me like he's saying they're worth a good ransom. But
that makes sense. That makes more
but
sense.
yours might be right too. I'm not really sure.
I don't know. Arthur gets this message, quickly assembles his army. But before his army even got there, the prisoners Gawain mentioned joined his knights in battle on the field, I think is how I interpreted it, and then made the Romans retreat. So somehow none of their knights were lost, but Sir Gawain was badly wounded in this great battle.
Yeah.
Arthur and his army arrive, discover they're not needed for fighting, but Arthur goes to Gawain, looks at his wounds, comforts him. I think that means gave him medical attention in this context.
I think in mine it specifies he's like, he got the best surgeon because he was worried. He was like, make sure he's good.
Yeah. So this chapter concludes by saying, basically, this is the start of Britain versus Rome. 10,000 Romans were killed in this skirmish. Arthur's army, celebrated that night, and the next morning Arthur sent all the prisoners to Paris with Sir Lancelot and Sir Cador, rather. I don't actually know how that name's pronounced, but let's go with Cador. And many more knights as an entourage. So that's the end of that chapter. I'm curious to know what yours was saying about the prisoners, like, in that moment.
Mine doesn't mention much about the prisoners other than that they took them and they sent them to Paris.
Yeah. So that's that. Is there anything that we want to anything lingering we want to discuss about this first half of the story?
I'm going to say no, other than I would keep in mind a couple of things for the next episode because I think they're relevant. First, that the ambassadors were in Arthur's court on New Year's Day.
Yeah.
That's important. I didn't know that was important because mine didn't specify that. That might be an argument that it's not important, but I promise full circle at the end. Second, don't forget some of the details of the battle with the giant on the hill.
Yeah.
That matters. The prophetic dream, the giant on the hill, and a lot of the second half tie together.
No, I think that talking about it with you, getting the comparisons from your version, I think that that battle with that giant is very significant because I didn't realize it was like a giant cut from the same cloth as Lucius's 50 giants. So yeah, I do think that's pretty important.
Yeah, so keep in mind the slaying of the giant and New Year's Day was when the ambassadors were there.
Okay, so that's that. In 2 weeks, we will cover the second half of Arthur versus Lucius.
The pitched battle between East and West.